Hi, welcome to APPIC and the APPIC Postdoctoral Committee's training on the postdoctoral application and selection process. The APPIC board and the Postdoctoral Committee would like to provide you with up-to-date information to make informed choices and to provide strong mentorship to your students. This training is for applicants as well as trainers, and it is organized in 3 parts. The first component is an overview of the process. The second component is information on resources to assist with the process. And the third and final component is a set of tips. Let's begin with that overview. So at this point, you've finished nearly all the requirements for your doctoral degree in psychology. You've started your internship, and if you're like many psychology interns, you might be wondering, do I really need a postdoctoral training experience? With many states supporting licensure for psychologists at the completion of the doctoral degree, should I just look for a job? What is the true value of postdoctoral training? Because it's not required for your degree, and it may not be required for licensure in the state or jurisdiction in which you wish to practice, this really is a personal choice. That being said, there are certainly a few key factors to consider when making this decision. First, you may want to think about the purpose of postdoctoral training. At a recent summit on postdoctoral training, there was strong consensus that this level of training is for specialized or advanced training. In other words, it's not for remedial training. It's not about accrual of hours for the mere purpose of licensure. It's about deepening and refining advanced or specialized competencies. Another consideration to think about is the financial aspect. One of the more common reasons students consider skipping a postdoctoral training experience is the financial implications and the realities of drawing a real salary sooner. However, there are a few financial and employment considerations that I think are commonly overlooked if you skip postdoctoral training and go straight into the field. First, many postdocs are hired directly into a job, which is beneficial in many ways. While we're not certain about the research on the topic, it is typically the case that psychologists with additional training are more desirable, which could translate into more and better and higher paying job options once the postdoctoral training experience is finished. In many cases, there are certain types of loans that can be deferred during postdoctoral training, even potentially with interest being deferred during that training time. In terms of the hours issue, not all states do require postdoctoral hours for licensure. However, some still do, and if you want to ensure portability and being able to practice throughout the United States and Canada, it might make sense to complete a postdoctoral training experience in order to get those hours, because you never know where you may want to practice, and so that professional mobility down the line could be very helpful for you. If you'd like to learn more about the summit that I mentioned previously, one place to start would be at the APPIC webpage. There's a section about postdoctoral training with a summary of the summit, recommendations. So you may start there to explore what the developing consensus is in the field regarding the current role of postdoctoral training on the continuum of training in psychology. In terms of what kinds of and how many postdoctoral training experiences are available in the field of psychology, it's really hard to know. There's an unknown universe of postdoctoral training programs and experiences. We are getting a better sense of what's available, but there's still very much more to learn. Here are some statistics on what we do know about postdoctoral training experiences. These are based on both APPIC member programs as well as entries in the Universal Postdoctoral Directory or the UPPD. However, these really do not represent the broad universe of all that's available in terms of postdoctoral opportunities. It's just a piece of the puzzle. Another piece that can be challenging about understanding the landscape of postdoctoral training opportunities is that there's use of varied terminology. So programs and positions use different terminology to describe sometimes the very same things. For example, the word specialty is used, and this actually is a specific term with a specific meaning. The Commission on Accreditation makes a distinction between health service psychology programs, including clinical, counseling, school, and substantive areas of practice, and training in recognized specialties. The CRISP taxonomy provides guidance on how to describe the depth of training in a recognized specialty, ranging from exposure to that recognized specialty to a major area of study, with that latter being the level that is required to seek specialty accreditation in a recognized specialty area from APA's COA. Sometimes specialty is used interchangeably with focus area, but they really are two different things. So a focus area is an area that is not a recognized specialty, but it may be a substantive part of a postdoctoral experience. So for example, a program in clinical psychology may have residents spend most of their time doing psychological testing, and so they might indicate that that program has a focus area on psychological assessment, which is different from a program that's accredited in the recognized specialty area of clinical neuropsychology, for example. Other programs, again in clinical or counseling psychology, might have residents or postdoctoral trainees spend a substantive portion of their time in a specific setting, such as primary care mental health integration, and then they might describe a focus area in primary care or integrated health care, or a focus in behavior change within a healthcare system, for example. Finally, there's no overarching organization, entity, or council that oversees all postdoctoral training and experience. And therefore, there's no final agreement on what makes a postdoctoral program versus a postdoctoral experience. Now, we spoke to this a bit earlier, but what are specialties, emphases, and focus areas, and how do they differ? Understandably, there's a great deal of confusion around specialty and emphasis and focus area training. Again, the CRISP taxonomy is a great resource for understanding these labels. When it comes to specialty training, as previously mentioned, APA's Commission on Accreditation, or COA, makes a distinction between clinical training in health service psychology and training in specific recognized specialties such as clinical neuropsychology, geropsychology, behavioral and cognitive psychology, rehab psychology, and so on. With specialty training, there's a clear path to specialty accreditation at the postdoctoral level for the training program, and there are also clear specialty training and education guidelines from each specialty council on what is required in order to state that the program is offering advanced postdoctoral specialty training with a major area of study in any given recognized specialty area. Completing a postdoctoral program that is accredited in a specialty area should prepare a trainee to meet the postdoctoral requirements for specialty boarding in that practice area. In other words, they should be well prepared for the postdoctoral component of training that's required to become ABAPT in that specialty. Now, with regard to emphasis training, this label can be confusing for applicants and for the public because it has a specific meaning in that CRISP taxonomy that I mentioned earlier. And this meaning is related to the depth of training in a recognized specialty. However, oftentimes emphasis training is not used in the manner in which it is described in the CRISP taxonomy, and instead people talk about an emphasis in a specific area that is not a recognized practice. For example, describing a program that provides substantive training in working with LGBT individuals or with working with sexual assault survivors, for example. And those are not recognized specialty areas, although programs still might describe that they provide emphasis training in working with LGBT individuals. As mentioned previously, the term emphasis comes from the CRISP taxonomy and is to be applied to programs referring to the depth of training in a recognized specialty area. So for example, a clinical psychology program that offers emphasis level training in health psychology, which is a recognized specialty, but the program is not accredited in health psychology, that would be a good use of the phrase emphasis. Finally, focus area is an appropriate description for advanced postdoctoral training with a specific problem or population that's not a recognized specialty. However, as I mentioned, many people in programs use focus area and emphasis interchangeably, which can be somewhat confusing. The role of research in postdoctoral training in psychology is evolving over time. Originally, postdoctoral training was primarily research-focused. This began to shift in the late 1990s when the American Psychological Association's Commission on Accreditation began accrediting postdoctoral programs that focused on clinical training, professional psychology, or health service psychology. Now, in postdoctoral training, there really is a continuum of focus on research, with some programs being nearly 100% research focused to the other end of the continuum where the programs are primarily clinically focused with very little research focus at all. Given this, some in the field have suggested that the Boulder model or scientist practitioner model of training is less important in more recent years. However, the new accreditation guidelines or standards of accreditation from APA's COA clearly state that science and integration of science with practice are profession-wide competencies that must be addressed at the postdoctoral level of training for clinically oriented programs that wish to obtain and maintain accreditation. Now, on the other side of things, when we look at applicants, one could ask, how important is research to applicants to postdoctoral training programs? And there is a continuum there too, with a subset of applicants on previous surveys indicating that research is not very important to them, with a number of people being in the middle of the continuum saying it's fairly important, and then some saying it's very important to them. So it varies from program perspectives as well as applicant perspectives. One thing that's important for applicants to know, especially applicants who are considering both clinically focused and research-focused programs, is that if you are looking at both types of programs, it does impact your selection experience and your application experience significantly. We'll discuss this later in further detail. For now, what is important for you to know is that the research and the clinical programs are often on divergent timelines when it comes to postdoctoral application and selection procedures. What about regulation and quality? This is another important consideration, determining the quality of your postdoctoral training program or experience. And you might be wondering, how important is it to attend an APA accredited postdoctoral program and/or an APPIC member postdoctoral program? And the answer really depends on what you're hoping to get from your postdoctoral training experience. For example, if you're looking for advanced training in research without a clinical component, then APA accreditation and/or APPIC membership may not be as relevant for you. However, if you are looking for advanced or specialized clinical training in your postdoctoral experience, you may want to prioritize accredited programs and/or APPIC member programs. Whatever you decide, it will be important to find ways to assess the quality of training programs that you are considering. And I do think regulation and quality is important. But at this point, the vast majority of postdoctoral experiences are not actually accredited or APPIC member programs, which means it's up to you as the applicant to find ways to determine the quality of those non-member or non-accredited programs. And I think it's important to point out the distinction between APPIC membership versus APA accreditation. So APPIC is a membership organization, and there are membership criteria that are reviewed that have to do with quality of training. But that's different from accreditation, which requires a level of self-study and also site visit. And so both are important, but they are different. And with accreditation, there's that external review and re-review that includes a site visit, and that's an important component that's not a part of APPIC membership criteria or a membership organization. So if you're considering programs that are not accredited and not APPIC member programs, it's very important for you to determine if they offer quality training, if they treat their trainees fairly, and if they have resources to provide adequate supervision, clinical experience, and didactic training. The application and selection process is very different at the postdoctoral level in comparison to the internship level. In part, this is because the postdoctoral training experience is not a degree requirement for psychologists, and this makes the role of regulation for postdoctoral training a little less clear. In other words, because it's not a degree requirement, far fewer programs are accredited or APPIC member programs in comparison to internship. And then similarly, the application and related selection process is not nearly as regulated as at the internship level. In other words, there's no match or centralized system managing postdoctoral application selection like there is at the internship level. There is one exception to this, which is the specialty area of clinical neuropsychology. A subset of those specialty programs participate in the neuropsychology match, but another subset of those programs do not participate in the neuropsychology match. So overall, the vast majority of postdoctoral programs do not participate in any kind of match process. The timeline for postdoctoral application and selection process begins early. Often applications for clinical programs are due in December or January. Applications for research programs can vary widely and are frequently related to grant funding cycles. So these can begin early in the fall, but can also go later into the spring. Thus, it's important for applicants to begin preparing early. One important step is to start by finding letters of recommendation writers from your internship program. In order to understand the current landscape of postdoctoral application and selection processes and procedures, it might be helpful to turn our attention briefly to the history of postdoctoral application and selection. Generally speaking, prior to 2016, there was no uniform selection process or time frame for all types of postdoctoral programs and all applicants applying to those programs. And certainly there was no centralized, organized process like a match for all programs participating in postdoctoral selection work. The field has tried many different strategies for postdoctoral application and selection processes, including a uniform notification date with use of reciprocal offers. And initially when this was implemented, it was mandated for all APPIC member programs, but the vast majority of postdoctoral programs are not APPIC member programs. So when this happened, really only a subset of the field was using the UND with a reciprocal offer. Then another strategy was attempted, which was use of suggested guidelines, creating a suggested time frame and a suggested set of guidelines for making offers. And then finally, a third strategy was a free market system, providing no guidance really to the field and allowing postdoctoral programs to regulate themselves and pick and choose how and when they might make offers and engage in the selection process. And generally speaking, none of those strategies have worked well in the past. And there was generally a sense that in order to get ahead in terms of obtaining a position and or filling one's positions, people needed to cheat, or that cheaters would always win and have the best outcome. So whatever the reason might be, what we do know is that the postdoctoral application and selection processes historically have not been smooth. In 2016, there was a postdoctoral summit that was hosted by APPIC and APA, and at that summit, these issues were discussed in depth. And following the summit, the first postdoctoral application and selection cycle following the summit, a great deal of work had been done based on the ideas generated at the summit. And so those ideas included things like development of a universal directory, which is currently the UPPD, and development of guidelines for all programs to follow should they choose, and also use of a uniform notification date with a reciprocal offer. And that first cycle following the summit was 2016-2017, and significant progress was made, and each year since then the processes have improved, with more and more programs collaborating and agreeing to follow the postdoctoral selection guidelines, and more programs choosing to list themselves in the UPPD. And so year over year, we see this process strengthening and getting better and smoother for both the applicants who participate in the process and also the programs who participate in the process. That being said, we certainly do not have a completely smooth and centralized process that everybody is following at this point, but it has gotten stronger and much smoother in comparison to where we were prior to 2016. I'd like to speak a bit now further on the more recent history of postdoctoral application and selection since the 2016 Summit on Postdoctoral Issues. In particular, I'd like to highlight the efforts that APPIC, the board, as well as the Postdoctoral Committee has engaged in since 2016 to bring more collaboration, cohesion, and a sense of community and order to the postdoctoral landscape, particularly around matters of application and selection. And this has been really a multi-pronged effort. One of the first strategies that's been utilized and refined year over year since the summit is the implementation of the APPIC Postdoctoral Selection Guidelines. And these are developed by the Postdoctoral Committee in coordination with the APPIC board. And one of the things that's wonderful about the APPIC Postdoc Committee is that they engage in survey strategies each year to get feedback from the psychology postdoctoral community, both programs and applicants, about how those folks believe things are going. So in terms of the postdoctoral selection guidelines, the majority of programs have indicated via survey data that the guidelines worked well or very well for them. And also, this part I think should be especially reassuring for applicants. The majority of applicants have indicated that they obtained a position, and even more so, I think what's exciting is that the vast majority of applicants who obtained a position indicated that they did so at their first, second, or third choice program. So things are working out very well for the applicants who apply to programs, and that's wonderful news. Another strategy that's been implemented and refined year after year since the summit is the UPPD. And what we really wanted to do was provide a one-stop shopping and searching location, or a hub for all postdoctoral positions, whether those were positions in programs that were accredited or not, or APPIC member programs or not, that everybody would go to a centralized location to gather all the postdoctoral program information in one spot. And that's what the UPPD really has become. And so this is a service that APPIC provides for the field to bring everybody together to the same place to do their searching for postdoctoral programs. And we see, again, year after year, more and more programs are listing their positions in the UPPD. A third strategy that's been engaged in since the summit is use of a variety of educational efforts to help educate applicants, folks at doctoral programs, folks at internship programs, and also training faculty and staff at postdoctoral programs about the postdoctoral application and selection process, as well as the landscape of postdoctoral training at the current time. And so if you go to the APPIC website, you'll find a number of these educational strategies and resources that have been put together, including webinars, so recordings of our webinars, also documents with overviews of the timeline for postdoctoral application selection, also the timelines as applied to a variety of areas of psychology training, so research-focused programs, neuropsychology-focused programs, and clinically focused programs as an example. In addition to those, we provide consultation and do our best to answer questions in whatever ways that we can to help support both programs and applicants through the process. And then finally, a key strategy that's been implemented since the summit and again refined year over year based on survey data and feedback from the field is the uniform notification date. So the uniform notification date is a shared date where programs can make offers at the same time, and we'll be implementing that again this current cycle. On this next slide, I want to point out what those numbers we were talking about on the previous slide highlight, which is that there's some very good news for postdoctoral applicants in that the imbalance between the number of applicants and the number of postdoctoral positions strongly favors applicants. In other words, there are more postdoctoral positions than there are applicants to fill them, and you see some evidence of that here on this slide. As I mentioned previously, another important consideration when exploring postdoctoral training opportunities is focus area versus specialties. And as I mentioned before, the terms focus area, emphasis, and specialty may be used interchangeably by programs to indicate that a training program or a postdoctoral position or experience is focused on a certain area or topic. However, the terms are not actually interchangeable, and the field is making some movement towards using these terms distinctly because they do each indicate different things. So when we talk about a specialty, this is a crisp, recognized specialty practice area that would be a member of the Council of Specialties and would prepare someone for the postdoctoral training requirement to become board certified or ABAPT in that recognized specialty area. Emphasis is a term from the CRISP taxonomy indicating the degree to which a program offers training in a recognized specialty area. And that degree ranges from exposure to major area of study, with emphasis being less than the latter and more than the former. And then finally, a focus area is a focused training experience with a problem, population, or competency that is not a recognized specialty area. Unfortunately for applicants at this point, programs themselves may not be tracking the differences between these terms, and thus many specialties are listed as relevant focus areas and vice versa in the UPPD listings and other program public materials. So it's really important for consumers or applicants to be tracking these differences and trying to understand what the programs are actually conveying in their public materials. And the numbers on this slide are from the 2016-2017 UPPD listings and give you some sense of the distribution of postdoctoral programs offering focused experiences versus specialty experiences or training. All right, now this gets us through that first portion, or our overview portion of the training, bringing us next to This brings us to the second section of this training, which is focused on resources and tools to assist postdoctoral applicants as they navigate the application and selection process for postdoctoral positions and post-internship opportunities. How do you learn about the application and selection process? One piece of advice is reach out to multiple sources. There are many, many resources, and it's a good idea to start out by exploring all of those resources. A starting point is your internship training director or your TD, APPIC, of course, through our website and listservs, and also your graduate program director of clinical training or DCT. However, it's important to know that knowledge about postdoctoral training application and selection varies widely between individuals. Not everyone you reach out to will be well informed or well versed on these issues because they are rapidly changing. And of course, the pool of positions changes each year. Therefore, it's important to be aware that there can be confusion and to keep asking questions and reaching out to multiple sources of information. One detail that became quite clear based on APPIC survey data of postdoctoral applicants is that they did not know where to go to find out about postdoctoral programs or how to apply. Given this, one of the key efforts of the APPIC Postdoctoral Committee is to make sure that people know where the resources are to learn about programs. So when it comes to learning about programs and post-internship as well as formal postdoctoral training opportunities, there are a number of resources. One of the first places to look, of course, is the APPIC directory online. Typically, there are about 200 or so APPIC member programs. That varies from year to year, sometimes a few fewer, sometimes more. What we know about the APPIC directory online and APPIC membership in general is that at this point it is likely the vast majority of postdoctoral opportunities are not APPIC member programs. So the programs listed in the APPIC directory are wonderful because they are APPIC members, which means they abide by the APPIC membership criteria, which provides a certain level of quality assurance. But we also know that that represents a minority of the post-internship opportunities that are available to people. So that is one place to look. Another place to look that I think is very important are email groups and listservs. So many specialty councils and training organizations and areas of interest have email groups that applicants can join, student members can be a part of, and oftentimes they will post training opportunities in those email groups, and so that could come to your attention in that way. Another thing to do, of course, is to ask your supervisors. Ask people who do the things that you're interested in doing where they obtained their postdoctoral training if they engaged in postdoctoral training, or if they know of good postdoctoral training opportunities. Certainly ask your internship training director, ask the faculty from your doctoral program, especially those folks who provide education and training at the doctoral level in the area of interest that you have. The APA Monitor can be another source of information on post-internship opportunities and formal postdoctoral education. And then finally, for the clinical neuropsychology specialty specifically, one place to look is the APSIN website. And that website lists all their member programs, and that is the subset of the clinical neuropsychology postdoctoral world that does have a match, a formalized matching process. Another place to look for clinical neuropsychology postdoctoral training opportunities is the Society of Clinical Neuropsychology, or APA's Division 40. There is a comprehensive list of training programs that's searchable by both level of training as well as geographic location on their website. One of the key recommendations from the Postdoctoral Summit in 2016 was for a centralized location to post positions for programs and for applicants to go to search possible postdoctoral positions. And so in 2016, the APPIC board supported the launch of the UPPD, or the Universal Psychology Postdoctoral Directory. This is something that APPIC funds and maintains and allows any program, APPIC member or not, and any applicant to access for no charge at this point in time. And the UPPD has a great deal of functionality. It allows applicants an easy means to search for programs based on a host of personal preferences such as geography, focus area, specialty, amount of research focus, type of institution, and so on. It also provides a simpler and streamlined way for programs to announce post-selection day information and updates. In other words, if a program has a vacancy following the uniform notification date, the UPPD is the easiest and most centralized place to post that opening, and applicants are used to going to the UPPD to look for vacant positions. So it eliminates the need for multiple listserv announcements that people tend to tune out after time. We believe the UPPD is a valuable resource to use to learn about the universe of postdoctoral programs and to facilitate the use of common strategies and procedures for postdoctoral selection. And it's already proven to be the case since our launch of this resource in 2016. As a field, we've been able to learn more about post-internship opportunities and postdoctoral training opportunities thanks to the listings in the UPPD. So we have a better sense of the universe of postdoctoral opportunities because of the UPPD. And again, because there is no cost for use at this point, APPIC is inviting and encouraging all programs to use this so that we can support people going to the same place to look for opportunities and so that we can continue to learn more about the universe of postdoctoral opportunities. The first year that we launched the UPPD was 2016. That year there were 906 positions posted in the UPPD. Each year since then, the number of positions has increased, and we expect to see that trend continuing until we better capture the bulk of the universe of postdoctoral opportunities in one place, and we don't believe we're quite there yet. In addition to the UPPD, there is also a universal application system, or the APPICAS system. And so this is another tool that APPIC is supporting, and along with the UPPD, it helps to provide a more uniform platform for postdoctoral applications, although not all programs are using the APPICAS at this time. We encourage all programs to post their positions in the UPPD, even more research-focused programs, because again, it allows for that centralized place for applicants to go to find out about opportunities. And there is a checkbox to indicate the extent that research is emphasized in a program. And so we want to make this an inviting space for the research programs to also post their positions, and we hope that we're doing that. This next slide just gives you the address for the UPPD and shows you a little bit of what you might see when you go to the website. Now, another source of information are email groups, and this is important. Similar to the UPPD, a recommendation from the Postdoctoral Training Summit was to change the nature of the APPIC Postdoc Network listserv or mail group. So as of September 1st, 2016, the advertising of postdoctoral programs and psychology jobs were no longer permitted on our Postdoc Network email group. And this change was in support of development of the UPPD as being the primary source of postdoctoral program marketing. Now, the mail group will continue to be used as a forum for programs and applicants to ask questions and generate discussions about postdoctoral training. It just won't support advertisement of positions, and instead all advertisement of positions will be routed to the UPPD. And that worked well last year, and we imagine it will continue to work well this year too. In addition, there are new APPIC postdoc focused listservs or email groups. So in addition to maintaining that postdoc network group, we've also developed new listservs related to postdoctoral training. The first is Postdoc News, which will allow news and information from APPIC about postdoctoral positions, including late-breaking news about postdoctoral programs. And then the second is the APPIC Jobs Network. So previously, the Postdoc Network listserv was well utilized as a source of information about psychology job announcements, and we want to continue to support those job announcements. And so we will provide and continue to provide that service to the profession, but we're doing it through the newly established Jobs Network. And so that network, that email group, the sole purpose of it is for announcing psychology jobs or positions that are not part of postdoctoral training programs. And to sign up for any of the APPIC email groups or listservs, you can go to our website here. You probably remember the APPI from applying to internship not so long ago. There is a similar, although much shorter, much simpler, centralized application tool for postdoctoral program applications. It is the APPIC Psychology Postdoctoral Application Centralized Application System, or APPA or APPICAS for short. This was funded by APPIC to assist with better coordination of applications to postdoctoral training programs, and we launched it in 2015. Use by programs is increasing each year since our launch in 2015. And each year since our launch, we've made technological improvements to the CAS system that allow it to be more streamlined and simpler to use for both applicants and programs. So it's likely that more programs will continue to use this system. It's important for applicants to be aware that while more and more programs are using the APPICAS system, not all programs will use it. So it's important to check the program website to understand how they will be receiving applications. Will it be via the APPICAS or through some other method? If programs are using the APPICAS, typically the APPA will contain and require that you complete common demographic and educational information, but it can be individually tailored. So programs can really refine what they would like to receive from applicants. It can be as simple as those basic demographic questions along with a CV and a cover letter, but it could include other things as well. So it will be important to read the APPICAS instructions for each individual program that you're applying for. There is a cost to applicants to use the APPICAS. It's $25 for the first application and $15 for each additional application. I will say that you only have to pay for the cost of a transcript from your doctoral university one time, and so it can be a cost savings or perhaps cost neutral depending on how many programs you're applying to and what the cost of multiple transcripts would have been had you had to purchase one transcript per program that you're applying to. So in that sense, the APPICAS may end up financially costing about the same as paying for all those individual applications if you were applying through some other mechanism. It's important to say that, refinements of the APPICAS are ongoing. So we've made a number of them since our initial launch. It's better and better each year, but there certainly are bumps along the road, and we solicit feedback each year and strive to improve the platform each year for each application cycle. To register for APPICAS, we have the link to the applicant portal on this slide for you. If you have questions, Joni is our representative at the Technology Partner Liaison International that supports the APPICAS, and so her contact information is also included on the slide. Finally, at the APPIC Postdoc Committee, we have Wayne Siegel as a point of contact regarding APPICAS issues, and then Allison Osfed as the APPIC board contact for APPICAS issues. And feel free to reach out to either one of us with questions or concerns about the APPICAS. And there is technical support. So if you have a technical support type of question, if you go to the applicant portal or our web page, there's tech support line and hours that you can contact those folks who will be able to answer those more nuanced tech support type of questions for applicants as they use the portal. Next slide, you see what you might encounter when you go to the APPICAS website, and we have information about the APPICAS that you can find from the APPIC website, and then beneath that we have the link to register at at the APPICAS website. Letter writers, this is important. Letter writers need to flexibly tailor and make letters for various types of postdoctoral programs. And so letter writers will have to upload a separate letter for each APPICAS application for their applicant. And this can feel time-consuming or frustrating to letter writers, but it's important because we really do want the letter writers to be able to individually tailor their letter for a research-focused program versus a more clinically focused program versus a different type of clinically focused program. So this really is a strength, although it's important to work with your letter writers so that they know in advance that they will have to upload a separate letter for each application that you're submitting, and they may need to provide extra time for that. Now, if your programs are all very similar, they can certainly choose to submit the same letter to each of the programs. That is up to them. But if your programs are quite different, it really is an advantage that they can create an individually tailored letter for each program. On this next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the APPIC Postdoctoral Selection Guidelines. You may be wondering how postdoctoral selection and offers are handled, especially without a centralized and regulated process like a match, especially as someone who just probably went through the match now that you're on internship. APPIC has created selection guidelines to help bring uniformity and fairness into the postdoctoral selection process. And what APPIC would like to do is narrow the selection window so the time frame for making offers becomes more reliable with a clearer beginning point than it has been in the past. And most importantly, what we really want is increased fairness for both students and for programs. However, not all programs will choose to use the guidelines, thus it's very important for applicants to ask what programs are doing. This is not the first year that APPIC has generated selection guidelines, and they have been questionably successful in the past years, although last year, the most recent year, was quite successful, and certainly having some structure and organization is better than none at all. And there are very strong reasons to continue to be optimistic about the guidelines this year because they went well last year, and some very strong and large training programs such as the VA nationally, the Kaiser system, and many others have already made public commitments to abide by the selection guidelines again this year. So the more people who participate, the better it is for everybody. So again, I think there's some good reason to be positive about how the guidelines and the selection process will go this current cycle. This slide begins our discussion of the APPIC Postdoctoral Selection Guidelines. Guideline number 1 is that there is a uniform notification date, or a date upon which programs should make their offers for postdoctoral positions. The second guideline is that programs should notify applicants if they are not being extended an interview offer or are no longer under consideration for a position with the program. The third guideline is that programs should communicate with applicants prior to the UND regarding how they intend to make their offers, for example, by email, by phone, by text, all of the above. The fourth guideline is that applicants should communicate with programs concerning how they may best be reached on the uniform notification date. The fifth guideline is that applicants may request a reciprocal offer from their top-ranked program if they receive an early offer from another postdoctoral program prior to the uniform notification date. Applicants who request a reciprocal offer must accept the position immediately if the reciprocal position is indeed offered to them. In other words, when you request a reciprocal offer, you cannot hold it if you get it. You need to accept it on the spot. The sixth guideline is that programs are to make reciprocal offers prior to the UND
only if their top-ranked applicant receives an offer from another postdoctoral program and requests a reciprocal offer from them. The seventh guideline is that applicants should ensure that they are available to respond to offers on uniform notification date beginning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Postdoctoral Selection Guideline number 8 states that applicants on the UND should acknowledge receipt of postdoctoral offers received through email or voice message within 1 hour of receiving the offer, even if they choose to hold the offer. Failure to acknowledge receipt could result in the program retracting the offer and moving to the next person on their list to extend the offer to. Guideline number 9 says that the programs on the UND should allow applicants to hold non-reciprocal offers for at least 2 hours. The 10th guideline states that programs should immediately notify all applicants as soon as they are no longer under consideration and when all the positions in the program are filled. The 11th guideline reads that after accepting an offer, applicants should immediately notify all programs for which they believe they are still under consideration that they have indeed accepted an offer. And the last guideline states that programs should email selected applicants with an official confirmation of the agreement within 48 hours.
You may be wondering if there are any resources for after the uniform notification day if someone does not end up with an offer. And I think first and foremost, what we want to point out is that if you don't have an offer, this is not a reflection on you as a person or your strength as a candidate. This happens sometimes. And the other thing is it's important to be aware that there are many great opportunities which will still remain. As I mentioned previously, the imbalance really favors applicants when it comes to postdoctoral applications and selection. So in terms of what steps to take next, you want to start with a problem-solving approach. The first step in problem solving is assessing your options. And a great place to go to assess your options will be the UPPD, because programs will be updating their UPPD postings to indicate unfilled positions. And so you'll know immediately on UND or just after UND what positions remain by going back to the UPPD. Once you've identified what those vacancies are, you can begin submitting new applications. Typically what we find is after the UND, the application and selection process goes at a much faster pace compared to prior to UND. We expect that there will be many great positions listed after the UND because there are more positions than applicants. And now we are moving on to that third section, general tips for making your postdoctoral search a success.
People often have a great deal of questions about the best way to approach applying for post-internship or postdoctoral training positions and opportunities. And so we wanted to focus on some general tips for setting folks up for success when they're preparing to apply to postdoctoral positions. Our first tip is, of course, begin early. Oftentimes this means beginning right at the beginning of your internship. Along those same lines, we recommend planning in advance. If you visit the APPIC website, the APPIC Postdoctoral Committee has put together a number of timeline documents that illustrate what to expect in terms of the standard timeline for the postdoctoral application and selection process as it pertains to research-focused programs, clinically focused programs, and clinical neuropsychology focused programs. It's often common to have a number of questions about, who should write letters. And so this is another, I think, important detail in terms of identifying letter writers early. And one of the things that's key here is knowing a bit about the sites or the programs that you're applying to, because each postdoctoral program will have a unique request in terms of letters that they would like to receive. So sometimes programs would like a letter from ADCT at the graduate program saying that somebody is on track to complete their degree. Sometimes postdoctoral programs want a letter from the internship training director saying that the applicant is on track to successfully complete the internship. Sometimes a letter from a research mentor or research supervisor is requested, and oftentimes for clinically focused positions or programs, letters of recommendation regarding clinical competencies are requested. So it's important to know what types of letters are needed as part of your application for each postdoctoral program or position that you're applying for. It's also important to identify those key people who can write letters for you to fulfill each one of those types of letters. And not only identifying them, but talking with them about writing letters in advance so they have adequate time to prepare to write the letters. And finally, confirming that they can write a strong letter on your behalf, because you do want strong letters of recommendation as part of your application for postdoctoral programs. In addition, of course, we recommend utilizing the UPPD or the Universal Psychology Postdoctoral Directory to search for programs. As we've discussed previously in this PowerPoint presentation, there are more and more programs in the UPPD each year, so we really see it as the hub for finding post-internship and postdoctoral positions. Another question folks have is, how many positions should I apply for? And this really is tricky to answer, and it's a personal answer. It really depends on what's important to you at this stage in your training and your life as well. Generally speaking, though, we know that most people apply for fewer postdoctoral positions than they did for internship positions. We also recommend applying for a range of programs or positions in terms of competitiveness. So looking at programs that range in terms of how hard they are to secure a position within. It's also a good idea to have a sense of what is your floor, and it's never a good idea to go below that. So you should not apply for programs that you really would never attend, even if they were the only program to give you an offer. So I think that's important. While a range of competitiveness is important, you don't want to have programs on your list that you know you would never attend. Many people begin to think about life as well as training at this point. And so they might be thinking about things like the geographic region where they'd like to settle down, or they might be thinking about institutions where they would like to work longer term. They may also be thinking about specialty areas where they'd like to obtain board certification later down the road, or specific problems or populations that they'd like to work with. So all of those factors could be key in determining what types of programs you apply to, and then therefore how many programs you apply to. I think another important strategy for approaching the postdoctoral application process is to be organized. One way that many people like to get organized is through use of a spreadsheet, and because we know this is so common, the APPIC Postdoctoral Committee has generated a template or a sample spreadsheet that can be utilized by applicants, and you can download that from the APPIC website. Generally speaking, whether you use our spreadsheet or you choose to make your own, the kinds of details that you would want to track about all the programs you are considering are things like the name of the program, the geographic location of the program, the focus area or the recognized specialty that it provides training in. If you're considering clinical neuropsychology programs, it would be important to know if the program is participating in the absent match or if it's an independent program. And if it is an independent program, what is the timeline for their recruitment process and their offers? For any programs that you're considering, it would be important to know if they're following the APPIC Postdoctoral Selection Guidelines or not. And if they aren't, when are they making their offers and how are they making their offers? It's important to note in your own opinion what you see as the strengths and the weaknesses of the program. You'd likely want to know about the compensation, both the stipend and the benefits. As I mentioned earlier, you want to know what kinds of letters are needed for this application and from who. In terms of markers of quality, it would be important to pay attention to whether or not the program is an APPIC member program, whether or not the program is accredited, if you're interested in research experiences, and in general, it would be important to know how much time is set aside for research, if any. The name of the training director or point of contact for the program is important to track, the best methods for communication with the program, the best ways to confirm if your letters of recommendation have been received, if the program is not using APPICAS, where you can see that within the APPICAS portal. Similarly, how to confirm that your application is complete if the program is not utilizing APPICAS. It's important to know if the program requires interviews or not, if it does require interviews, if those must be on site or not, and also the dates or the range of dates that the interviews will be conducted. And especially if they're not following the guidelines, it would be important to know how long you can hold an offer should you receive one. And then finally, this will be fluid and will evolve throughout the process, but how you would rank the program. So all of those are important details you'd want to be tracking in your own spreadsheet or in the template that the postdoctoral work group has put together.
In terms of approaching applications, when it comes to preparing these, it's important to start early, there's a theme here, and to give yourself plenty of time, because these materials are the first impression the program will have of you. A few important suggestions include following the instructions provided by the program and making sure your materials are error-free. Have friends, colleagues, anybody review your materials and use spell check and grammar check. Make sure you address all your correspondence to the correct program and the correct training director or point of contact for the program. Any case materials required, for example, a work sample that you need to submit, need to be completely de-identified in a way that's consistent with our ethical guidelines and HIPAA. This is important to triple check. It will not make a good impression if you breach confidentiality in your application materials. You really want to use the application as an opportunity to showcase your very best work. You want to strike a balance between being both personable, so someone who would be enjoyable to know, and professional, someone who would be enjoyable and appropriate in their work with you. And finally, fit is really important. So you want to be sure to illustrate why your goals and strengths are a strong fit for the program's offerings. Here are some general tips about the application process and how best to manage it. First, you want to educate yourself about the process and the programs you plan to apply for, which if you are reviewing this educational module, you're already doing, so you're off to a strong start. But there are even more educational resources, and so you want to check out all those resources available through APPIC and the APPIC Postdoc work group. Also, you want to educate yourself about geographic trends that might impact you. As an example, historically, the research-oriented programs in the Northeast United States have been especially challenged with regard to making early offers, and so knowing that or knowing about similar trends that might affect you would be important. You should definitely educate yourself about whether or not the programs you're applying to are adhering to the APPIC selection guidelines. Also, even if they're Abiding by the guidelines, you should find out if there's any aspect of the guidelines that will be altered for the specific programs you're applying to. For example, some programs can't allow the 4-hour hold time and instead have reduced it to less than that. So if there's some nuance like that that's specific to one of the programs you're applying to, you'd want to have that information in advance. Make sure you research the timelines for application deadlines, interviews, and offers at each program you apply to, because even if all the programs you're applying to are abiding by the UND and the APPIC guidelines, so the offers might be on a similar timeline, the applications and the interviews might not be on a similar timeline. So just knowing what the timelines are is very important for you in the process. Although some people are navigating applying to programs that aren't participating in the APPIC selection guidelines, such as heavily research-focused programs, as well as those that are health service psychology-focused programs. And if that's the case for you, it's important to be prepared to know what the different aspects of expectations might be for those two very different categories of programs. And you also will probably want to be ready to talk openly with the programs that you're applying to about the fact that you're applying to multiple types of programs with varied deadlines. I imagine most of them would appreciate knowing this about you, especially if they see you as a strong applicant. So for the clinically or health service psychology focused programs, for them to know that you're also applying to research programs that might be making earlier offers, they'd want to know that. Another suggestion, of course, for managing the process is to engage in consultation. Seek advice from an advisor, supervisor, mentor, and/or your internship training director. This is especially important when it comes to managing offers, and probably you want to seek this advice and guidance before you start getting offers, so you're prepared to think about how to prioritize what your programs are and how you want to respond to certain offers. You can also consult with APPIC, you can consult with the APPIC board, or you can consult with the APPIC Postdoctoral Work Group. Contact information for current board member Allison Osfed is on the slide, as well as the current chair of the APPIC Postdoctoral Work Group, Dr. Wayne Siegel. A third recommendation is to be prepared. Have your personal rank ordering of programs completed before February 26, 2018, or the UND, if not much earlier than this. This way, if you do receive an early offer from a program, you will know how you want to proceed. For example, if it's your first choice, you would just accept it. But if it's not, you might want to ask about holding it so you can ask your top choice program about a reciprocal offer. What about interviews? Preparing for postdoctoral interviews can be nerve-wracking. We do have a few pointers to help you feel more prepared and comfortable, although much of this will be quite familiar to you now that you've completed internship interviews. In terms of accommodation for travel and in-person interviews, it's quite reasonable to request a Skype or phone interview in lieu of an in-person interview. It's also reasonable to request at least 2 weeks' notice before scheduling in-person interviews that require travel. This is noted in the APPIC Postdoctoral Selection Guidelines. When it comes to preparing for the interview itself, it is very important that you prepare your questions specific to the site. You are trying to determine fit as much as the program is. In other words, you are shopping here too, and the interview is an important opportunity for you to gather the information that you need to determine if the program is right for you. Do read the program materials. Many sites find it off-putting when applicants ask questions that are clearly and explicitly addressed in the website and other public materials that the staff often put a great deal of time into care into updating annually. You should also be ready to answer typical interview questions, such as your goals, how you see yourself in terms of fit with the site, how you have handled an ethical dilemma, a case example where things went well, went poorly, or both, perhaps your thoughts about a case vignette, your research goals. It's also important to present yourself professionally in terms of attire that is appropriate for the setting or context within which you are interviewing. Of course, it's important to use your best social skills and interpersonal skills. And really take advantage of the interview as an opportunity to show that you are both personal and professional. So you would be fun to have around and professional to have around at the same time. Aside from the interview, there may be other communication that occurs with programs. And many times applicants feel shy or nervous about communicating with the programs they've applied to. And while this is understandable, there is no need to be concerned about asking a few important questions along the way, especially if you cannot find the information in the program's UPPD listing or other public materials. Don't be shy asking the program about their selection process. You want to know how they are handling selection work this year, particularly if they're not following the APPIC guidelines. So you want to make sure you ask about whether or not they're following the guidelines if that's unclear from their public materials, and also to ask about any alterations to any aspect of the guidelines. It makes sense to inquire about how reciprocal offers should be handled if they arise. In preparation for the UND, it's important to make sure programs know how to contact you on that day. And it's important to make sure you're available to take calls and respond to email on that day. You also want to make sure you know how to best contact programs. It's very important that your schedule be clear on the UND. In other words, you really want to work with your training director to make sure you're available for a significant portion of the day to take calls and respond to email. You may need to take vacation or educational release time or some other kind of leave to ensure that you're available for the full day. And that's in your best interest to do so because you don't want to miss an offer because you're busy leading a group therapy session and you can't get to your phone to accept it. It's also important to know how long programs will allow you to hold an offer, so you're prepared in advance with that information, particularly if they're not following that aspect of the guidelines or they're not following the guidelines at all. After participating in the internship match, where discussing rank information is not allowed between programs and candidates, the idea of directly discussing postdoctoral offers can seem uncomfortable. For this and for many other reasons, postdoctoral applicants often have questions about what to do if they receive an early offer and how they are supposed to handle reciprocal offer requests. The good news is that the APPIC Postdoctoral Selection Guidelines applies to this situation and provides guidance for applicants who might find themselves in this circumstance. In terms of an early offer is defined as an offer that's given to a candidate for a position prior to the UND or the Uniform Notification Date. So if you find yourself in this circumstance, receiving an early offer prior to UND, and it is from a program that is not your first choice, you may contact your top-ranked program to ask for a reciprocal offer. The program, in turn, may ask you for verification of your early offer. And it is acceptable to provide this to your top-ranked program should they request it from you. If your top-ranked program is able to extend a reciprocal offer to you, meaning you are their top-ranked candidate, it's expected that you will promptly accept that reciprocal offer. Sometimes the program may not be able to extend a reciprocal offer to you, either because they are not done with their selection work or because you are not their top-ranked candidate. It is acceptable for you to ask the program if they are able to disclose any information about where you might fall on their ranking list. And some programs will be comfortable providing this to you. Some programs may not be able to because they're still doing their interview process, for example. But if programs are able to provide you with information about where you fall on their rank list, that can be helpful because if you know if you're toward the top of their list, in the middle of their list, or toward the bottom of their list, that can help you to weigh this early offer that you have in hand and help you decide, do I want to go ahead and accept this offer knowing that I'm highly ranked but not top ranked for my preferred site? Or if I'm toward the bottom of the list, maybe I do want to accept this offer that I have in hand. Finally, the last pointer here is do not request a reciprocal offer if you are not prepared to accept the position immediately if you are provided that reciprocal offer. Now we will discuss uniform notification day. As with early offers and reciprocal offers, applicants typically have a number of questions about how to handle offers received on UND. So APPIC guidelines for postdoctoral selection also address the uniform notification day. When you receive an offer on UND, you have three options. You can accept the offer immediately, you can decline the offer, or you can ask to hold the offer. If you ask to hold the offer and decide to do so, then the position is frozen and it should not be offered to any other candidate during the hold period. Now, while the guidelines suggest a hold period of 4 hours, this can be tricky because the guidelines are recommendations, but they are not binding, and some sites and institutions may not be able to allow a full 4-hour hold. So when you ask to hold a position on UND, it's important that you confirm how long you can hold that position with the site that is offering you that position. Another important piece about holding offers is that once you are holding an offer, you must hold no more than one offer at a time. So holding more than one offer at a time is out of alignment with the recommended guidelines from APPIC. It's unprofessional, and most importantly, it conveys a certain level of disrespect for the programs and your fellow applicants, especially the applicants who may be waiting for one of those multiple offers that you're holding. So after you receive and begin holding an offer, what you need to do is convey to the positions that are ranked lower than the position that you are currently holding on your list. You need to contact those sites and let them know that you're holding an offer and you'd no longer like to be considered for their position. That way they can remove you from their list. Each time you receive a higher ranked offer on your personal list, you need to let the previous lower ranked offer that you were holding know by contacting the site. Let them know that you would like to release that hold. That way they can move on to the next person on their list. And then you can hold the higher ranked position. It's critical that applicants keep all programs on their personal preference list informed if they accept or hold offers. So the more that we can communicate about this, the better for all sites and applicants involved in the process, because it will prevent the log jams or holdups and allow people to continue down their list making offers and allow applicants to continue receiving and accepting or holding offers. What about acceptance of an offer? So first of all, if you've secured a postdoctoral position, take a moment to congratulate yourself and enjoy the moment and just feel great. While postdoctoral offers are not the same as a binding match agreement, professional ethics and etiquette are important here. Sometimes, hopefully this is the minority, people might experience second thoughts about their position and or may have regrets about their decision. If this happens to you, it's important to not withdraw from your accepted offer. The professional world of psychology is quite small, and there could be a significant ripple effect across your career by making a decision such as this. Now, there are occasionally some extenuating circumstances that might make this reasonable to discuss or approach with a site. These are really extenuating, exceptional circumstances. And in such a case, it's going to be important to reach out immediately to the program and the training director to talk about possible accommodations or the withdrawal due to your extenuating and unforeseen life changes. What about following the uniform notification date? So if you have not secured a position, as we discussed previously, the most important thing to do first is go to the UPPD. Given the imbalance, there will be a number of great positions available on the UPPD. And the UPPD should indicate how many of those programs are available now after UND. Now, when you go to look for positions after the UND, the application and selection process will probably be abbreviated and will move much more quickly compared to before the UND. The process following the UND will probably be quite fluid and variable. The UND rules no longer apply, so be sure to clarify with programs what the expectations are. In other words, after the UND, the APPIC Postdoctoral Selection Guidelines really aren't in effect, and so you want to confirm with the programs how they're approaching filling their vacant positions post-UND. They may have variable hold times, they may or may not interview. If they do interview, it's likely that it would be by telephone or video conference. One thing that we do know is that many excellent positions will still become available well after the UND. Sometimes that's because the positions did not fill through the UND. Sometimes it's because someone who accepted a position needed to withdraw due to one of those unexpected life events that I mentioned earlier. And sometimes that's because new programs are developed and new funding comes into place, and so there's a late-breaking position or program that becomes available after the UND. So all of these should be represented in the UPPD, and that's why we recommend people go there after UND to look for available positions. On behalf of the APPIC board and the APPIC postdoctoral work group, we'd like to wish you the best of luck with finding the perfect postdoctoral position or training experience for you, and we hope that this educational information has been helpful for preparing you for the process.